The narrative begins by showing a psychiatric hospital, where a young man named Nick arrives to visit his mother after several years of absence. Today is his 23rd birthday, and he never knew his father and has lived alone since the age of 8, since his mother was institutionalized due to constant mental problems. During the visit, when Mrs. Maria looks at her son, she says that he resembles his father, a statement that contradicts the words she told him in the past, when she claimed she had never known the man who fathered him. Confronted by her son, Maria becomes frightened, having a brief and terrifying vision, and moves away from Nick. She says she imagines he wants to know about his father, but she will not tell him, even though the voices she hears in the wall are begging her to reveal the truth. Believing his mother is still mentally disturbed, Nick says goodbye and leaves the place, not hearing Maria declare that someone is searching for him. When he leaves the hospital, he puts on gloves and goes to meet his friend Ryan. They head to a bar to celebrate Nick's birthday with some friends. Among them is Eve, a young woman he has just met and immediately admired. When one of the guys asks why Nick does not show what he can do one last time, Ryan asks everyone not to be intrusive about the young man's life. Seeing that Nick wants to impress the girl, Ryan warns him not to do anything, but he ignores the advice. Another friend named Brian tells the confused young woman that Nick can see the death of whoever he touches. When Eve questions the gift, Nick starts touching his friend's hands, trying to identify whether someone will suffer a horrible death, since that is the only thing he can see. For some of the friends whose hands Nick holds, he senses nothing bad, but when he touches Brian, he sees an explosion destroying him. The contact causes Nick to black out, and his friends try to wake him up. Brian shouts, wanting to know his future, but the moment becomes an opportunity for Nick to take Eve's hand. Fortunately, he sees that everything will be fine with her. Back at the psychiatric hospital, Maria awakens after hearing a noise coming from the basement air vent. A deep voice asks if she told the young man anything, but the woman confesses that she did not. Suddenly, a ball of fire leaps onto her, consuming her. A few minutes later, the scene returns to the young Nick and Eve, who spend some time together in a room, happy with their growing friendship. They talk about their lives, and Nick shows the scar he intentionally made on his hand, wishing that dark gift would end. Suddenly, Ryan enters the room and calls his friend to watch the news. The tragic report reveals that the psychiatric hospital was destroyed by a fire. Many lives were lost, including Nick's mother. The scene jumps 8 months after the tragic event, and Nick goes to speak with Judge Paul to receive the will left by his mother. Something important, since he is still searching to discover who his father is. Upon arriving at the office, he notices the judge talking to someone, but when he enters, he sees nobody in the room. Nick is surprised by what his mother left him, only a folder filled with papers, and one of them immediately catches his attention. The judge says he is available for any questions the young man may have, and when Nick leaves, Paul approaches the wall and tells someone inside the ventilation shaft that the young man now possesses what belonged to him. Arriving home, Nick shows the folder to his now pregnant wife, Eve. He presents his many childhood drawings, where he repeatedly sketched a similar house over consecutive years without ever having seen the residence. Next, together with the folder, he shows them a photograph of an old real house, the same one from his drawings. Ryan questions what his friend means. Then Nick presents the document, stating that the house belongs to him. Excited, the group sets out to visit the residence. After hours on the road searching for an old town called River's End, they stop at an establishment where they come across a map of the desired town, and beside it, a photograph of the house that belongs to Nick. He asks the owner where the residence in the picture is located, claiming to be the owner. A local resident says that what the young man seeks no longer exists, because a flood destroyed everything and swept away the remains. The owner confirms the story, explaining that 23 years earlier, the entire town of River's End had been destroyed. At that moment, Ted, another resident, speaks about a legend in which many claim to have still seen the house standing. The man says the flood did not have the strength to destroy the residence, but merely carried it from one place to another. Believing the local story, Nick starts heading back home, observing old ruined houses along the roadside. Suddenly, a working man appears on the road, almost causing an accident and frightening the group. His name is Sam, and he is accompanied by his co-workers Christian and Liliter. The group consists of state workers mapping the region's valleys. Knowing the group often surveys land, Nick asks them about his house. They know the legend, but wanting to help the young man, Christian asks the group to follow him. Wanting to know beforehand, Nick touches Sam and sees him being gravely injured by someone. They then depart and enter the forest. At a certain point, they leave the vehicle, and when Nick slips down a slope, he accidentally touches Christian and also sees what appears to be the man's death. Descending farther, Christian shows a piece of wood and believes a house passed through there, so he suggests they continue on foot, even knowing Eve is pregnant and should not hike in the late stage of pregnancy. Nick knows this, but he needs to verify whether the house truly still exists. Lilith stays with Eve while the men continue searching for the unknown. Observing that there is a huge trail through the forest, as if something had passed there deliberately, Nick rushes ahead along the path. It does not take long before the group finally finds what they were searching for, the old house, stopped by a massive ancient tree. Sam cannot believe it, knowing that because of the flood, the residence should have been destroyed. Suddenly, the door opens with the blowing wind, creating dark suspense among the group. Unexpectedly, a male voice echoes from inside, ordering the men to go back and stay away. Sam attempts to start a conversation, but the stranger soon emerges and reveals himself. His name is Walter. The man claims he was in that house before any of them were born and does not want intruders there. Sam still wants a peaceful dialogue, but Walter calls him Samael and tells them to leave. Nick confronts him about what he came searching for, and even though the man says what he seeks is not there, Nick insists. Walter turns toward him, inviting him into the house, but only him. Ryan tries to stop his friend from entering, claiming his father is not in the house, yet the young man goes inside anyway. Inside, Nick notices there is a hollow space within the walls, an axe leaning in a corner, and the base of the external tree that stopped the house. Walter explains that lives were hung from that tree, and at that moment, the old man grabs Nick against the wall and terrifies him, declaring that the house was blamed for the devastating flood. He says the house should have been destroyed, but for some reason it still stands, with almost everything perfectly where it should be. Ryan shouts for his friend when he sees, among the vegetation, motionless men, each holding an axe. Walter orders Nick to leave immediately and commands the group to run, otherwise they will all die there. As soon as they exit, Walter signals the strange men to pursue them, showing they will kill them if they are caught. The group ends up separating, but the hunters throw their axes with the clear intention of killing the intruders. After several minutes of running, Nick and Ryan reunite with Sam. However, at that moment, Walter's axe is thrown and strikes Sam in the chest. Terrified, the friends run and can only watch from afar as the worker Sam is brutally finished off. Meanwhile, in the vehicle, Lilith chats cheerfully with the pregnant Eve when, in the next instant, during that apparent peace, their companions approach screaming for them to get into the van. The group quickly drives away, but the hunters approach wanting to destroy them. Christian accelerates and runs over the men, but nothing happens to them, and they rise again and continue chasing the van. Fortunately, the group reaches the town, but they notice there is no movement. The establishments are empty, and there is no sign of life. However, they cannot see that the place is actually crowded with people, and Ted is able to see them. He goes to the pantry and turns toward the basement air vent, where he says he will bring number 23 to him, and then his return will become possible. A few minutes later, on the road, Christian becomes distracted and does not notice Ted standing in the middle of the way. An accident is narrowly avoided, but the driver swerves off the road toward the forest, sliding downhill and eventually crashing into a tree. When they regain consciousness, they stare in disbelief at what they see ahead. The same house is extremely close to them, something impossible since they had driven 15 kilometers south. In disbelief, they step out of the vehicle. The group plans to return home after Christian checks the surroundings and sees nobody. Knowing the road back is unlikely due to the remote location of the house, they head toward the residence because night is approaching and Eve needs shelter. Before entering, Eve starts an argument with her partner, claiming it is his fault, imagining that he himself wants to be in that place. Nick feels a breeze pushing him to look upward. At that moment, he sees several people hanging from the branches, though Eve cannot see them. He ends up touching the tree and feels strange things, almost collapsing. Eve calls for help, and Ryan runs over, but Nick touches him accidentally and senses his friend's fatal future. This time, Nick takes longer to awaken from the trance, and the mark of his hand is burned into the tree like a scorch mark. Minutes later, the group is inside the house, and Eve takes care of her companion while he remains unconscious. Ryan says he and Lilith will go to the van to fetch equipment they can use and will return shortly. The two reach the vehicle, but for a moment they surrender to passion and begin a romance. They make noise which attracts Walter's hunters, but the leader orders his zombies to return to the house and await the signal. Inside the residence, Nick awakens beside Eve. When questioned about what happened, he seems shocked because he sensed the death of a person who had already died, the one hanging from that tree. Soon after, he reunites with his friend, who has returned with Lilith, but Eve quickly calls them. Everyone notices there is something inside the walls, and through the air passage, the group senses something alive there. Nick and Ryan try to corner whatever it is. Suddenly, from a crack in the wall hidden behind a curtain, something lifts the fabric. Believing it to be a sewer animal, Ryan strikes it with a stick, causing dark liquid to splatter across the wall. The moment creates confusion and fear, but it does not make the group leave the house. Several minutes later, Nick awakens hearing his mother's voice calling him from inside the air duct. He approaches and manages to see his mother there. She says his father is also there and asks him to open the basement door. At that moment, he notices that half of her face is disfigured. Nick then wakes from the nightmare and, curious about the dream, decides to go to the basement door, which is barricaded by roots. Christian arrives and helps him open it. As soon as they do, the zombie creatures nearby awaken and begin running toward the house. Hearing noises in the dark forest, Ryan realizes the axe-wielding zombies are approaching. Frightened, he runs inside. At that same moment, Eve notices Nick wants to enter a strange place and stops him. Unexpectedly, the apparent attack freezes. When Nick goes to check the front door, he notices several zombies standing motionless outside, surrounding the house. When Christian tries to enter the basement, they discover that opening the door activates those humans, but closing it immediately paralyzes the attack again. Having an idea, Nick asks everyone to cross through the frozen crowd and return to the vehicle. However, the moment everyone steps outside, the creatures awaken again, and the group must hurry. Unfortunately, they separate, and Nick tries to distract one zombie, but it ignores him completely. Soon after, Nick finds Ryan, and the two come across Sam's dead body. However, both notice that the dead man's hands are changing appearance and developing sharp claws. Nick sees that the man's skin is peeling away, as if it were merely a covering. Pulling it off, they discover something emerging underneath. Remembering what Walter called the man, Ryan realizes the name means Angel of Death. He also explains that the name Lilith means Queen of Darkness. She seduces men into impurity and later feeds by drinking their blood. In the darkness of the night, Lilith also steals children from pregnant mothers in order to devour them. Fearing for his partner's safety and his child, Nick rushes toward the vehicle. Inside, the leader turns to speak with Eve, and the pregnant woman feels a strong kick when the woman brings her hand close to her belly. She insists on touching it gently, showing kindness and affection for the child. The loving mother allows the touch, but suddenly Lilith begins squeezing Eve's stomach, causing her pain. She reveals her demonic fury, but fortunately, it quickly ends when Walter unexpectedly appears on top of the vehicle and strikes her with an axe, killing her. Once everything calms down, Walter explains that the demon Lilith and the others they encountered were sent to destroy Eve and her child. The evil plan was for Nick to enter the house and surrender their son. That is why they had not actually traveled the 15 kilometers Christian described, since the demon created illusions to deceive them. Walter asks Eve to leave that forest and abandon Nick behind, already knowing the young man is being called to enter the house, even without understanding the danger of being there. Walter reveals that Nick's father, known as the Beast, is imprisoned inside and can only come into the world of the living if his own son invites him out. By coincidence, this can only occur on the 23rd birthday. He explains that Nick can see people's future deaths precisely because he is the son of a demon. Years earlier, his mother Maria encountered an entity in the basement, and from that encounter conceived a baby. Eve says Nick is not evil, but Walter warns that she will truly know him if the worst happens. Meanwhile, Nick tries to find his partner's vehicle, but he cannot locate it, for reasons now explained. The demon Christian emerges from the darkness, asking Nick to stop searching for what is not his destiny and return to the house that belongs to him. Nick then realizes the man before him is not ordinary. He immediately asks about the creatures that pursued them, and Christian explains they are called God's gargoyles, creations made to protect souls against demons. As an explanation, he says it was Walter who brought them with the intention of driving Nick away, and thus preventing the young man from entering the basement where his father lives. Christian urges Nick to enter, but at that moment, the protectors appear before the house as a blockade. However, just as God has his warriors, evil has its own as well. Ted, another demon, brings other zombie beings with him to fight the protectors. The battle is brutal, but Nick manages to enter the house with the help of the evil being who sacrifices his existence so the young man can get inside. Several hours later, Eve walks through the forest until she is found by Ryan. She confesses what she discovered and warns her friend that Nick is inside the dark residence. When the two approach the clearing where the battle took place during the night, they see many bodies lying on the ground, all with their hearts torn out. Wanting to find their friend, they enter the house and come across Nick, collapsed, covered in blood. The young man awakens in terror, unable to understand what happened moments earlier. Reflecting on it, he remembers the horrifying moments and tells them what happened inside the house. Father and son were talking when Walter and his protectors entered trying to stop him, but they could not prevent it. Nick was fatally wounded by an axe, yet his injuries bring him no pain nor cause his death. He appears fully aware of his actions, and when Ryan notices there are hearts inside a cloth, Nick, in a possessed manner, says he needs 3 more, his friends, Eve's, and that of his son. Realizing Nick has become a monster, Ryan tries to pull Eve away from him, but unfortunately Nick, with supernatural strength, pierces his friend with his hand and steals his heart. Terrified, Eve runs outside, but she collides with someone and loses consciousness while the house door is locked. When she awakens, Eve is in a hospital receiving treatment and has already given birth to her son. Fortunately, the angel known as Walter saved her from the forest and took her far away from danger. The scene jumps 4 years later. Eve speaks with someone on the phone, stating that she destroyed the will connected to the residence, claiming nobody will ever find the house in River's End again. Without her noticing, her son draws the same house Nick used to draw as a child. At that moment, it is revealed that everything was always guided by the evil entity whose voice echoed through the basement air vent, influencing the boy Nick to recreate every detail of the house, and now influencing the boy Tommy, turning it into a future goal, and hoping that on his 23rd birthday, it will have another opportunity to emerge into the world of the living. This reveals the true tragedy of the supernatural story. The entity has manipulated entire generations for thousands of years, seeking to achieve the only way to free itself. The drawing is not a coincidence. It is a calling to the supernatural.